The salt in the air was a lie. So was the sleepy small-town charm of Port Mercy. To the tourists who trickled in during the summer, it was a picturesque slice of New England nostalgia. To Alex Mercer, it was a beautifully wrapped box with something rotten inside. Alex Mercer, DEA agent, masquerading as a down-on-his-luck deckhand named Alex Riley, stood on the town's main pier. The wood, weathered and silver, groaned under his boots. He watched the fishing trawlers, their paint peeling, their nets mended with a practiced care, chug into the harbor. They looked like they'd been fighting the Atlantic for a century. But the trucks that met them at the dock were different. Newer, heavier. Their suspensions didn't so much as dip when they were loaded with crates of cod. Port Mercy was a town that shouldn't exist. Its main street was too clean, its storefronts too busy, its trucks too new for a place whose primary industry was supposedly a dying fishery. The prosperity here was an anomaly, a statistical ghost that had drawn the DEA's attention. And now his. His cover was thin, but it was all he had. A few weeks of odd jobs, sleeping in a cheap motel, and asking quiet questions in the local bars had gotten him exactly nowhere. The fishermen were a closed loop. They looked at him with flat, unreadable eyes and spoke in monosyllables. They weren't just private, they were disciplined. The name on everyone's lips, spoken with a reverence usually reserved for saints, was Silas Blackwood. He was the town's patriarch, a man in his 70s who'd supposedly never left Port Mercy. He'd built the Fisherman's Co-op, funded the new school, and made sure no family in town ever went hungry. He was a hero. Alex's file said he was also the head of the most sophisticated smuggling operation on the eastern seaboard. Tonight, Alex was out of time and patience. He needed a way in, and he needed it now. He pushed off the pier and walked toward the only pub in town, a dimly lit place called the Salty Siren. A wooden sign, carved with a mermaid whose smile was more of a sneer, swung over the door. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of fried fish, stale beer, and low conversation. The place was half full, every stool occupied by men in flannel and thick jackets. Their hands were like worn leather, their faces etched by salt and wind. They didn't look up when he entered, but he felt their collective gaze shift, a palpable weight on his shoulders. He walked to the bar. The bartender, a burly man with a thick gray beard, wiped the counter with a rag that looked older than Alex. "What'll it be?" the bartender grunted, not looking at him. "Beer, whatever's on tap." The man slid a frosted glass toward him. $4. Alex paid, took a sip, and let the silence hang for a moment. "Slow night," he said, keeping his voice casual. The bartender just grunted. "Heard you might be looking for an extra hand on the boats," Alex tried. "I'm strong. I know my way around a deck." The bartender stopped wiping. He looked at Alex then, his eyes a pale, washed-out blue. "All the boats are full." "Really?" "The North Star looked a little short-handed this morning. Took them an extra 10 minutes to tie off." The bartender's jaw tightened. A few of the men at the bar shifted in their seats. Alex had just crossed a line. He hadn't just been asking questions. He'd been watching. Closely. "You watch a lot of things, don't you, son?" A voice rasped from the end of the bar. An older man, his face a roadmap of wrinkles, stood up. He was smaller than the others, but he moved with a coiled energy that suggested he was far more dangerous. He walked toward Alex, his boots thumping softly on the worn floorboards. "I just noticed things," Alex said, meeting the man's gaze. "It's a habit." The man stopped a foot from him. He was close enough for Alex to smell the tobacco on his breath. "Habits can get you hurt in a town like this. We value our privacy." "I'm just looking for work, not trouble." "Trouble has a way of finding men who look for work in the wrong places." The man looked Alex up and down, a slow, deliberate appraisal. "You say you're strong?" "I am." "Good. The sea serpent lost a man yesterday. Stupid accident. Slipped on a wet deck, broke his neck." He said it with the same emotion he'd used to discuss the weather. "Be at the South Pier at 400. Don't be late, and don't bring any questions." The man turned and walked back to his seat without another word. The conversation in the bar slowly resumed, a low hum that was now laced with a new tension. Alex finished his beer in one long swallow. He had his in. He also had the distinct feeling he'd just been invited to his own funeral. The South Pier at 0400 was a different world. The tourist town charm was gone, replaced by a cold, industrial reality. The air was sharp with diesel and the smell of low tide. A single, harsh floodlight illuminated the sea serpent, a trawler that looked even more menacing up close. Its hull was dark green, almost black, and rust bloomed on it like a disease. The man from the bar was waiting at the gangplank, his arms crossed over his chest. "You're late," he said, though Alex's watch read 3:58. "I'm here," Alex replied. The man grunted. "I'm Captain Finn. You do what I say when I say it. You don't talk unless you're spoken to. You don't ask questions. You break something, you fix it. You break my trust, I'll feed you to the crabs. Understood?" "Understood. Get on board." The crew was already at work preparing to cast off. There were 4 of them, all moving with a silent, practiced economy of motion. They didn't acknowledge Alex's presence, their faces grim masks in the pre-dawn gloom. They were a unit, and he was an intruder. The first few hours were pure hell. The work was brutal, designed to break a man's body and spirit. Alex hauled heavy nets, scrubbed decks until his knuckles bled, and sorted through the meager catch they brought up. It was hard, honest labor, but it felt like a performance. The real catch, he suspected, wasn't in these nets. Around mid-morning, as they chugged further out into the open ocean, Captain Finn ordered the crew to bring up a special set of nets from the hold. These were different, heavier. The winch groaned under the strain. When the nets broke the surface, they weren't full of fish. They were full of sealed, waterproof crates, each about the size of a suitcase. "Get these below now," Finn barked. Alex and another crewman, a hulking brute named Jory, started hauling the crates toward the cargo hold. One slipped from Jory's grasp, and Alex caught it before it hit the deck. It was heavy, far too heavy for fish, and through the thick plastic he felt the distinct, hard edges of something that wasn't organic. It felt like a brick. Jory snatched it back, his eyes narrowing. "Watch yourself, new guy." They stacked the crates in a hidden compartment beneath a false floor in the hold. Alex counted 12 in total. As he helped Jory secure the false floor, his fingers brushed against a small tear in the plastic wrapping of one crate. He felt the corner of what was inside. It was a sealed plastic bag filled with a fine white powder. Cocaine. His heart hammered against his ribs, but his face remained a blank slate. This was it, the proof he needed. But it was also a death sentence if he was caught. He finished his work in silence, his mind racing. He couldn't just get off this boat. He was miles from shore, surrounded by men who would kill him without a second thought. Later that afternoon, a second trawler, the North Star, appeared on the horizon. It pulled up alongside them, and the 2 crews worked in silence, transferring more of the heavy crates from one ship to the other. The operation was seamless, terrifyingly professional. This wasn't just a few fishermen getting greedy. This was a well-oiled machine. As the sun began to set, casting long orange shadows across the water, Captain Finn called Alex over. The old man's eyes were like chips of granite. "You've got a good back, Riley," Finn said, his voice low. "And you keep your mouth shut. That's good." "I just need the work," Alex said, repeating the line he'd used at the bar. Finn nodded slowly, as if considering it. "I see a lot of things, too. I see a man who watches more than he works. I see a man who asks questions in bars. That makes me nervous." Alex's blood ran cold. This was it, the test. "I'm just trying to figure out who to trust," Alex said, choosing his words with care. "Last place I worked, a guy got his fingers broken for talking to the wrong person. I learned to keep my eyes open." Finn stared at him for a long, silent moment. The only sounds were the hum of the engine and the gentle slap of waves against the hull. The entire crew was watching them, pretending to work. "Smart," Finn said finally, a flicker of something like approval in his eyes. "In that case, I've got a different job for you, something that requires a man with smart eyes." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small, heavy pouch. "We're heading back in now. There's no more work for you on this boat, but there's work ashore." He tossed the pouch to Alex. Alex caught it. The weight was familiar. It was a brick of cocaine, wrapped tightly in plastic and tape. "There's a man named Gabe at the truck stop off Route 1. You give him this. You don't talk to anyone else. You don't stop for anything. You get back to me before sunrise with the payment. Do that, and maybe you've got a future in Port Mercy. Fail." Finn let the threat hang in the air. "And you've got no future at all." The sea serpent slid back into its berth at the south pier just as the last sliver of sun disappeared below the horizon. The town lights twinkled, a false blanket of security over the darkness underneath. Alex didn't wait to be told twice. He hopped onto the pier, the heavy pouch feeling like a lead weight in his jacket pocket. "Riley," Finn called from the deck. Alex turned. The old man's face was shadowed, but his eyes glinted in the dim light. "Don't disappoint me." Alex just nodded and walked away without looking back. He didn't head toward his motel. He walked to the edge of town, his pace steady, his senses on high alert. Every car that passed felt like a surveillance vehicle. Every shadow seemed to hold a watcher. He found a beat-up pickup truck parked behind an abandoned cannery, the keys in the ignition exactly as Finn had described. It was a beater, anonymous and perfect. He pulled onto the coastal highway, heading north toward Route 1. The two-lane road was empty, flanked by dense black woods. The only sound was the truck's rattling engine and the hiss of the tires on the wet asphalt. He kept his speed just at the limit, trying to be invisible. 15 minutes in, a pair of headlights appeared in his rearview mirror, far back but gaining fast. Alex's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. He was being followed. He was sure of it. The lights closed the distance, their beams filling his cab. He gripped the pouch in his pocket, his mind racing for an escape plan. He could pull over, make a run for it. But where would he go? Deep in these woods, he'd be hunted down like an animal. The car was right on his tail now. So close he could see it was a dark sedan. It wasn't a cop car. It didn't have the telltale push bar or the array of antennas. It was just a car that wanted him to do something stupid. Instead of speeding up, Alex slowed down. He tapped the brakes, a gentle tap, then another. The sedan stayed with him, its high beams blinding. Alex took a deep breath, forcing the panic down. This was a test. It had to be. They wanted to see how he'd handle pressure. He saw the sign for the truck stop up ahead. He put on his blinker, a calm, deliberate motion. The sedan didn't pass. It followed him right off the highway and into the sprawling, neon-lit parking lot of the Big Rig Diner. Alex parked near the back, away from the 18-wheelers. The sedan parked 2 rows away, its engine still running, its lights cutting through the night. Alex got out of the truck, keeping his movements slow and non-threatening. He walked toward the diner, his hands in plain sight. He could feel the eyes on him from the sedan. He pushed through the diner's glass door. The place was loud and greasy, filled with the chatter of truckers and the clatter of plates. He scanned the room. A man sat alone in a corner booth facing the door. He was big, with a shaved head and a thick, braided beard. He wore a greasy mechanic's jumpsuit and was slowly stirring a cup of coffee. He didn't look up as Alex approached. "Gabe?" Alex asked, his voice low. The man didn't answer. He just tapped the Formica tabletop in front of him. Alex slid onto the bench seat opposite him. He cautiously placed the heavy pouch on the table. Gabe finally looked up. His eyes were small and dark, like chips of obsidian. He reached out, his hand massive, and pulled the pouch toward him. He opened it, glanced inside, and then closed it. He slid a thick, sealed envelope across the table. "Finn wants you back before sunrise," Gabe said, his voice a low rumble. "And he said to tell you the next run is bigger. He needs a man who can handle a truck." "A truck?" Alex asked, the word out before he could stop it. Gabe's eyes hardened. "You ask a lot of questions for a guy who just wants to work." "Just making sure I can handle the job," Alex said smoothly. Gabe stared at him for a long moment, then gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. "Be at the South Pier tomorrow, 300. Don't be late." He stood up, leaving the envelope on the table, and walked out of the diner without a backward glance. Alex picked up the envelope. It was thick with cash. He waited a full 5 minutes, ordered a coffee he didn't touch, and then walked back out to the truck. The dark sedan was gone. He got in, his heart still pounding, and drove back toward Port Mercy. He had passed the test, but he had a sinking feeling he had just been promoted from deckhand to target. The drive back to Port Mercy was suffocating. The envelope of cash on the seat beside him felt less like a reward and more like a contract signed in blood. Every mile brought him closer to the heart of the operation and further from the safety of his own identity. He couldn't go back to his motel. Not yet. He had one stop to make. On the outskirts of town, past a small, weathered church, was a historical marker for a forgotten shipwreck. Behind the marker, a loose brick in the church's foundation, was his dead drop. It was a risk, but it was the only way to get information out. He parked the truck, walked casually to the marker as if reading it, and quickly slipped a small folded note and one of the $100 bills from the envelope into the hollow behind the brick. The note was simple: truck run. 0300, South Pier. Bigger shipment, need backup. He got back in the truck and drove to the motel, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. He had done his part. Now, he had to survive the night. He didn't sleep. He just waited, watching the clock tick past 2 a.m. At 2:45, a knock came at his door, sharp and deliberate. It wasn't Captain Finn. Alex opened the door to find two large, impassive men in dark suits. They looked like they belonged in a corporate boardroom, not a rundown motel in a fishing town. "Mr. Riley," one of them said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Mr. Blackwood would like to see you." This wasn't part of the plan. The pier, the truck. This was something else, something unexpected. "I'm supposed to be at the South Pier," Alex said. "Mr. Blackwood's requests take precedence," the other man stated. It wasn't a suggestion. Alex knew he had no choice. Refusal was a death sentence. He nodded, grabbed his jacket, and followed them to a black, unmarked SUV idling in the parking lot. They drove in silence through the sleeping town and up a winding coastal road to a house that wasn't just a house. It was a fortress, perched on a cliff overlooking the angry black ocean. It was a beautiful, modern home of glass and steel, a stark contrast to the rustic charm of Port Mercy. The men led him inside, where the air was warm and smelled of old books and expensive wood. And there, sitting in a leather armchair by a massive stone fireplace, was Silas Blackwood. He was older than he looked in the DEA file, his face a web of fine lines, but his eyes were sharp and clear. He wasn't wearing fisherman's garb. He was dressed in a simple, elegant sweater and slacks. He looked like a retired professor, not a drug kingpin. "Alex Riley," Blackwood said, his voice a calm, resonant baritone. He gestured to the chair opposite him. "Please sit. Can I get you a drink?" "I'm good, sir," Alex said, his mouth dry. Blackwood smiled, a thin, knowing expression. "Finn tells me you have a good head on your shoulders, that you're calm under pressure. He also tells me you ask too many questions. Which is it? Are you smart, or are you stupid?" Alex met his gaze. "I'm careful." "Careful is good," Blackwood said, steepling his fingers. "Careful men live longer. I built this town on careful men. I brought them prosperity when the government abandoned them, when the fish disappeared, when the world decided Port Mercy wasn't worth saving. I provide for my people, Mr. Riley. I protect them." He stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the ocean. "The truck you'll be driving tonight, it contains medicine for a sick world. It's the lifeblood of this town. The cash you picked up, that's for Mrs. Gable's cancer treatment. That's for the Henderson Kids College Fund. That's for a new roof on the library. Do you understand?" The audacity of it was breathtaking. He was wrapping his criminal empire in a flag of community service. "I understand," Alex said, his voice steady. "Good." Blackwood turned back to him, the warmth gone from his eyes, replaced by a chilling emptiness. "Because the men you're delivering to are not careful men. They are wolves. And if you are not a lion, they will devour you. The truck is loaded at the pier. You will drive it to a warehouse in the city. You will be met by a man named Rocco. He will give you a key. You will use that key to open a storage locker. Inside, you will find a payment. You will bring that payment back to me. Any deviation, any delay, any sign of trouble, and my men will find you, and they will find everyone you have ever cared about. Are we clear?" "Crystal." Blackwood nodded. "Then go. The lions are waiting." The two men in suits escorted Alex out of the house and back to the SUV. They drove him to the South Pier. The truck was there, a large white semi-trailer, its engine idling softly. Jory, the hulking crewman, was in the driver's seat. He got out when he saw Alex. "You're driving," Jory grunted, tossing him the keys. "I ride shotgun. Don't do anything stupid." Alex climbed into the cab. The weight of the mission settled over him. He was no longer just an observer. He was the lion. And he was driving straight into a pack of wolves. The semi-trailer rumbled through the sleeping town, its headlights cutting a clean path through the darkness. Jory sat in the passenger seat, a silent, hulking shadow. He didn't speak. He just stared out the window, his presence a constant, oppressive weight. The silence was a test, and Alex knew it. Any attempt at small talk would be seen as weakness. They left the coast behind, the familiar scent of salt air replaced by the exhaust and industry of the city's outer belt. The highway gave way to potholed streets lined with warehouses and chain-link fences topped with barbed wire. This was the city's underbelly, a place where legitimate business went to die. "Rocco's a psycho," Jory said suddenly, his voice a low growl. "He gets off on scaring people. Don't let him." "I'm not scared of him," Alex said, keeping his eyes on the road. "You should be," Jory grunted. "Last driver we sent, he came back crying. Blackwood didn't like that. Sent him on a permanent fishing trip in the middle of the Atlantic." The threat was clear. Failure wasn't an option. Alex followed the GPS directions to a dead-end street, pulling up to a massive, corrugated metal warehouse. All the windows were broken out, and the loading bay doors were sealed with rust. A single bare bulb burned over a steel door, casting a sickly yellow light. 3 men were leaning against the wall, their forms distorted by the shadows. One of them, a tall, lean man with a cruel smile and a scar that cut through one eyebrow, pushed himself off the wall and walked toward the truck. This had to be Rocco. Alex killed the engine. "Stay here," he said to Jory. "Like hell I am," Jory shot back. "I'm coming with you." They both got out of the cab. The air was cold and smelled of rust and decay. Rocco stopped a few feet away, his 2 men flanking him. He was dressed in expensive jeans and a silk shirt, an odd contrast to the grim surroundings. "Well, well," Rocco said, his voice smooth and oily. "Silas sends a new face, and he brought his pet gorilla. I'm touched." "Where's the key?" Alex said, his voice flat. He wasn't here to trade insults. Rocco laughed, a harsh barking sound. "Eager, I like that. But first, let's make sure the product is up to snuff." He nodded to his men, who produced crowbars and moved toward the trailer. "That's not the deal," Jory snarled, taking a step forward. Rocco held up a hand, his eyes never leaving Alex. "Relax, big fella. I'm just looking. Silas and I have an understanding. But you're new. I don't have an understanding with you." His men swung the crowbars, the metal screeching as they pried open the trailer doors. The interior was dark, but the faint outline of the stacked crates was visible. One of Rocco's men climbed inside, ripped open a crate with a knife, and dipped a finger into the white powder. He tasted it and gave Rocco a subtle nod. "It's good," Rocco said, his smile widening. "As always. Now about the key." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small brass key, holding it up between his thumb and forefinger. "Come and get it." It was a schoolyard bully's trick, a power play. He wanted Alex to walk into his space, to show submission. Alex didn't move. He just stood there, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched, thick with tension. Jory's hand drifted toward the small of his back, where Alex knew he kept a gun. Rocco's men tensed, their hands ready on their own weapons. "You know," Rocco said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper as he took a step closer to Alex. "Silas told me about you. Said you were a mystery. Said a man with your skills doesn't just show up in a dead-end town looking for work." Alex's blood turned to ice, his cover. It was blown. Blackwood knew. Rocco leaned in, his breath hot against Alex's ear. "He wanted me to test you, to see if you're a lion or just a cop in a costume." The word hung in the air, a death sentence. Rocco's smile vanished, replaced by a predator's snarl. Before Alex could react, Rocco drove the heel of his hand hard into Alex's sternum. The air exploded from Alex's lungs, and he stumbled backward, gasping for breath. Jory roared and lunged forward, but Rocco's men were ready, tackling him to the ground. Rocco was on Alex in an instant, grabbing him by the collar and slamming him against the side of the truck. "Blackwood sends his regards," Rocco hissed, his face inches from Alex's. "He said to make it look like an accident." Pain exploded in Alex's chest, but training took over. He didn't think. He reacted. As Rocco slammed him against the truck, Alex brought his knee up hard, connecting with Rocco's groin. It was a dirty, desperate move, and it worked. Rocco's eyes bulged, his grip on Alex's collar loosening for a fraction of a second. It was all Alex needed. He drove the heel of his palm upward, smashing Rocco's nose. Cartilage crunched with a sickening wet sound. Rocco stumbled back, howling, blood streaming down his face. The chaos was the signal Jory needed. With a roar of pure rage, he bucked, throwing one of his attackers off balance. He slammed his head back, breaking the other man's nose, and then twisted, grabbing the first man by the arm and snapping it like a dry twig. The man screamed and went down. Rocco recovered, his face a mask of fury. He pulled a gun from his waistband. "You're dead," he screamed, aiming at Alex. But Jory was faster. He kicked the gun from Rocco's hand, sending it skittering across the asphalt. Jory was a whirlwind of brute force, a brawler who fought with terrifying efficiency. He landed a series of body blows on Rocco, driving him back against the warehouse wall. "Get the truck!" Jory yelled over his shoulder. Alex didn't hesitate. He scrambled into the driver's seat, fumbling with the keys. His hands were shaking, adrenaline surging through him. He jammed the key into the ignition and turned it. The engine roared to life. He saw Jory land one final, devastating punch that knocked Rocco unconscious. The remaining henchman, seeing his leader down and his friend with a broken arm, took one look at the enraged Jory and ran. Jory didn't chase him. He turned and sprinted for the truck, yanking open the passenger door and throwing himself inside just as Alex slammed the truck into gear. "Go!" Jory yelled. Alex floored it. The big rig lurched forward, tires screaming on the pavement. He swung the wheel hard, the trailer swinging wide as he navigated the tight turn out of the dead-end street. He didn't stop. He just drove, weaving through the industrial park, trying to put as much distance between them and the warehouse as possible. They drove in silence for 10 minutes, the only sound the hum of the engine and their ragged breathing. Alex's chest ached where Rocco had hit him. Jory was bleeding from a cut above his eye. Finally, Jory spoke, his voice low and rough. "Blackwood set you up." Alex glanced at him. "You think?" "He knew," Jory said, staring out the window. "He sent you in there to die. He wanted Rocco to do his dirty work." "Why?" Alex asked, though he thought he knew the answer. "Because I'm a cop." Jory turned to look at him, his expression unreadable. "I figured that out the first day. You watch too much. You ask questions with your eyes. A real down-on-his-luck guy, he's scared. He keeps his head down. You're not scared. You're focused." "Then why did you help me back there?" Alex demanded. "You work for him." "I work for the co-op," Jory corrected, his voice tight with anger. "I work for the town. I used to work for a man who protected his own. This is something else. Sending a man to his death without a fight, using us as disposable trash, that's not the Silas I signed up for." He shook his head, a flicker of something that looked like shame in his eyes. "Rocco's a piece of garbage. He's been skimming product for years, selling it on the side. Blackwood knows, but he does nothing. We're not a cartel anymore. We're just a business. And Blackwood is a CEO who will sacrifice a pawn to protect his bottom line." Alex processed this. Jory wasn't an ally. He was a man with a grudge, a loose cannon. But right now, a loose cannon was better than nothing. "So what do we do now?" Alex asked. Jory looked at the trailer in the side mirror. "We have this. Blackwood's entire shipment, and we have Rocco's payment." He patted the envelope on the dashboard. "We have everything. He thinks we're dead. Rocco thinks we're on the run. For the first time in a long time, we have the advantage." Alex's mind raced. This was his chance, not just to escape, but to burn the whole thing to the ground. "What's the advantage? We've got a drug lord and a psycho buyer both hunting for us." "No," Jory said, a dangerous glint in his eye. "We have a choice. We can run, or we can go back, and we can finish this." "Go back?" Alex asked, his voice laced with disbelief. "He tried to have me killed. He'll be expecting us to run, not to charge back into the lion's den." "Exactly," Jory said, a grim satisfaction in his tone. "He's expecting us to be scared rats, scurrying for a hole in the wall. He won't be expecting us to come at him. He's a king, Alex. He sits on his throne and assumes his pawns can't think for themselves. He's wrong." Alex gripped the steering wheel, the truck's engine a steady thrum beneath him. The DEA agent in him was screaming to get to a safe house, to call for backup, to let the tactical teams handle it. But the man who had lived in Port Mercy, who had seen the quiet discipline of the crew, knew that a raid would be a mess. It would be a bloodbath, and Blackwood was smart enough to have plausible deniability. They'd get the drugs, maybe a few low-level fishermen, but Blackwood himself would walk away clean. "What's your plan?" Alex asked, his mind already working, adapting Jory's raw anger into a strategic objective. "We hide the truck," Jory said, his voice firming up. There's an old sardine cannery on the north side of the peninsula. It's been abandoned for decades. No one goes there. We stash the rig and we make a call. A call to who? To Blackwood, Jory said. We tell him we're Rocco's crew. We tell him we killed you and me, took the truck and the payment. We tell him we're willing to sell it all back to him for a price. Alex saw the genius in it. It was a gambit, a high-stakes bluff that would force Blackwood out of his fortress. He'd have to come to them, to negotiate, to recover the product that represented the lifeblood of his town and his power. And when he shows up? Alex asked. Then we end it, Jory said simply. No, Alex countered. When he shows up, I end it. My way. Jory looked at him, the suspicion back in his eyes. Your way? I need to make a call too, Alex said. I have a contact, someone who can help, but I need to get to them, and I need you to trust me. Jory was silent for a long moment, staring out at the dark highway. Why should I trust a cop? Because right now I'm the only thing standing between you and a life sentence for trafficking, Alex said bluntly. And because I'm the only one who can make sure Blackwood pays for what he's done, not just to me but to this town, to you. Jory let out a long, slow breath. The old cannery, it's off Peninsula Road. There's a dirt track, almost hidden by overgrowth. Follow it to the end. Alex nodded and took the next exit, heading back toward the coast. The plan was insane, a desperate gamble built on a foundation of mistrust. But it was also the only plan they had. They found the dirt track without issue, a narrow path choked with weeds that scraped against the sides of the truck. It twisted through the woods for half a mile before opening up into a large clearing dominated by the skeletal remains of the cannery. The corrugated metal walls were rusted through in places, and the roof had collapsed in on itself. It was the perfect place to disappear. Alex backed the truck into the ruins of the main building, hiding it from view of the road. He killed the engine. The sudden silence was deafening. All right, Jory said, opening his door. What's the move? I need to get to the church on the edge of town, Alex said. I left a message there. I need to update it, tell them what's happening. I need them to be ready to move when Blackwood makes his move. That's too risky, Jory said. Blackwood will have men watching the town. You'll be seen. Then create a distraction, Alex said. A big one. Something that will draw every available cop and lookout to the other side of town. Can you do that? Jory thought for a moment, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across his face. The fuel depot at the North Pier. One small fire and every volunteer firefighter in the county will come running. It'll be chaos. Do it, Alex said. Give me a 1-hour window. I'll be back. Be careful, cop, Jory said, his tone almost a warning. You too, Fisherman. Alex slipped out of the truck and melted into the darkness of the woods, leaving Jory alone with the millions of dollars in contraband. He moved quickly, silently, a ghost in the night. He had 1 hour to get his message, get back, and set the final trap for the king of Port Mercy. The woods were a labyrinth of shadows, but Alex moved through them with a predator's grace. Every snapped twig underfoot sounded like a gunshot in the stillness. He kept to the tree line, skirting the edge of town. The distant lights of Port Mercy seemed to mock him, a beacon of the false peace he was about to shatter. He saw one of Blackwood's black SUVs crawling down Main Street, its headlights sweeping across the storefronts. He froze, pressing himself against the rough bark of an old oak, holding his breath until the vehicle passed. They were looking for him, or for a body. The clock was ticking. He reached the church without further incident. The historical marker stood like a lonely sentinel. He knelt, his heart pounding, and worked the loose brick free. The space behind it was empty. They had already retrieved his first message. A wave of relief washed over him, so potent it almost buckled his knees. They were engaged. They were watching. He pulled a small pen and a folded piece of paper from his jacket. He wrote quickly, his handwriting a scrawl in the dim light. Blackwood tried to kill me. Survived. Have Jory, crewman, as ally. We have the truck and payment. Hiding at Old Cannery, North Peninsula. We are calling Blackwood, posing as hijackers, to lure him out. We'll set meet time. Be ready to move on my signal. This is our only shot. Mercer. He folded the note, slid it into the hollow, and replaced the brick. He also took back the $100 bill. It was evidence. As he turned to melt back into the woods, a flash of orange lit the horizon to the north, followed by another. A moment later, The first faint wail of a siren reached him. Jory had created his distraction. The window was open. Alex sprinted, no longer concerned with stealth. He moved through the trees, his lungs burning, his mind focused on the cannery. The sirens grew louder, a chorus of approaching chaos. He reached the dirt track and followed it back to the ruins. Jory was waiting by the truck, a gasoline can at his feet. "They'll be busy for an hour at least," he said, a grim satisfaction on his face. "The whole North Pier is going up." "Good," Alex said, gasping for breath. "Now we make the call." Jory pulled a cheap, prepaid burner phone from his pocket. He dialed a number from memory and put it on speaker. It rang 3 times before a calm, familiar voice answered. "Finn." "It's not Finn," Jory growled. "It's Jory, and I've got your product." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Jory, where's Riley, and where's the truck?" "Riley's fish food," Jory lied smoothly. "And the truck is safe. Rocco's men got greedy. We took care of them. Now we're taking care of business." Another longer pause. Alex could almost hear the gears turning in Finn's head. "Blackwood wants to speak to you." A moment later, Silas Blackwood's voice came through the phone, as calm and composed as if he were ordering groceries. "Jory, I'm disappointed. I thought you were a loyal man." "Loyalty doesn't pay for a funeral," Jory shot back. "You sent us to die. Now you're going to pay to get your shipment back. 5 million, unmarked. You have 1 hour to get it to the old cannery on the North Peninsula. Come alone, or the whole thing goes up in flames." Blackwood let out a soft, chilling laugh. "You're a fool, Jory. You've always been a fool. You think you can threaten me? In my town?" "I'm not in your town right now," Jory said, "and I'm holding your life in my hands. 1 hour." Jory hung up and crushed the phone under his boot. "He'll come," he said, his eyes blazing. His pride won't let him do anything else. "He won't come alone," Alex said, already scanning the decaying structure of the cannery. "He'll bring his suits. He'll bring Finn. He'll bring an army." "Good," Jory said, hefting a heavy iron pipe from the debris. "More targets." For the next 30 minutes, they worked in a tense, efficient silence. Alex used his tactical training to identify choke points and fields of fire. Jory used his knowledge of the old building to find weak spots in the walls and rusted metal catwalks above. They weren't just hiding, they were turning the cannery into a kill box. Finally, they took their positions. Alex was hidden in the shadows of the collapsed roof, a clear line of sight to the main entrance. Jory was tucked away in a side office, ready to flank anyone who came inside. They waited. The minutes stretched like an eternity. The only sounds were the wind whistling through the holes in the metal walls and the distant, fading sirens from town. Then a new sound, the low, distinct crunch of tires on the dirt track. They were here. A single pair of headlights cut through the gloom, sweeping across the rusted walls of the cannery. The black SUV rolled to a stop 50 yards from the main entrance. The engine died, and the silence that followed was heavier than before. The driver's side door opened. Silas Blackwood stepped out, looking utterly composed. He wasn't wearing a suit, but a simple dark coat over his sweater. He looked like a man taking an evening stroll. Captain Finn got out of the passenger side, his face a stony mask. A third man, one of the suits from Alex's motel visit, emerged from the back, his hand already inside his jacket. "Jory," Blackwood's voice echoed in the vast, empty space. "Come out. Let's not be childish. You have something that belongs to me. I have something that belongs to you, your future." Jory emerged from the shadows of the side office, the iron pipe held loosely in his hand. "My future is buried at the bottom of the ocean with the men you sent to die, you old bastard." Blackwood sighed, a sound of profound disappointment. "I sent you to test a stranger, Jory. A stranger I suspected was a threat to our community. Your death would have been an unfortunate but necessary sacrifice, but you survived, and now you've made a mess." "I'm not the only one who survived," Jory said, a grim smile on his face. From the shadows above, on a rusted catwalk, Alex stood up, his weapon trained on Blackwood. "The game is over, Silas." Blackwood looked up, his eyes finding Alex in the gloom. For the first time, a flicker of emotion crossed his face. Not fear, not surprise, annoyance. "Agent Mercer," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "I must admit, I'm disappointed. I expected someone more subtle, a DA agent posing as a deckhand. It's so cliché." "He knows who you are," Jory growled. Of course I do, Blackwood snapped, his gaze shifting back to Jory. Did you really think I wouldn't have my new deckhand thoroughly vetted? I knew who he was from day one. I just wanted to see what he was made of. And you, Jory, you showed me exactly what you're made of. Treason. He reached into his coat pocket, but not for a gun. He pulled out a small black device with a single red button on it. A detonator. This whole place is wired with enough explosives to turn this rust bucket into a crater, Blackwood said calmly. I came prepared for rats. I just didn't realize there were two of you. Throw down your weapons, and my man here will give you the 5 million. You walk away. You try to be heroes, and we all die together. Your choice. The situation had flipped. They were no longer the hunters. They were the trapped. Don't do it, Jory, Alex yelled. He'll kill us anyway. Jory hesitated, his eyes darting between the detonator in Blackwood's hand and the gun in the suit's hand. He was a brawler, not a strategist. He was out of his depth. But then he did something unexpected. He laughed, a short, sharp, bitter laugh. You know what, old man? I'd rather die a rat than live a dog. With a roar, Jory charged. It was the diversion Alex needed. As Blackwood's attention snapped to Jory and the suit raised his gun, Alex fired. Not at Blackwood, but at the suit's weapon. The shot sparked off the metal of the pistol, sending the man howling in pain. At the same time, Jory slammed into Blackwood, knocking the detonator from his hand. It skittered across the concrete floor. The two men went down in a heap of flailing limbs. Alex leaped from the catwalk, landing hard but rolling to his feet. He sprinted toward the fight. The suit was clutching his shattered hand, neutralized. It was just Alex, Jory, and Blackwood. Jory had Blackwood pinned, his hands around the old man's throat. But Blackwood, with a surprising burst of strength, drove a thumb into Jory's eye socket. Jory screamed and fell back. Before Blackwood could rise, Alex was on him. He kicked the detonator away, then drove his knee into Blackwood's chest, pinning him to the ground. He pressed his gun to the kingpin's forehead. Federal agent, you're under arrest, Alex panted, the adrenaline afire in his veins. Just then, the night exploded with light and sound. Flashbangs detonated at the entrances, and the air filled with the shouts of dozens of DEA agents swarming the building. Hands up, on the ground! Federal agents! Finn and the injured suit were immediately swarmed and cuffed. Jory, clutching his eye, was gently secured by a medic. Alex kept his gun on Blackwood, who lay on the concrete, his composure finally shattered. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. You have no idea what you've done, he hissed. You've destroyed this town. No, Alex said, his voice low and hard. You did. I just came to clean up the mess. As agents led Blackwood away in handcuffs, Alex watched the flashing red and blue lights reflect off the rusted walls. In the distance, he could still see the glow of the fire at the North Pier. The town was safe. But as he looked at the broken men being loaded into vans, he knew the price of its safety had been paid in blood, lies, and the shattered soul of a community that had forgotten the difference between a savior and a tyrant. The Fisherman's cartel was finished. Port Mercy would never be the same.